When my husband Paul died, I lost everything. Our savings, our home, even my dignity. At 67, I found myself on my son Michael's doorstep, begging for a place to stay. The cold look in his eyes said it all before he even spoke those cutting words. I don't feed extra mouths. My own flesh and blood, the boy I had sacrificed my promising research career for, now treated me like a burden. He forced me to take a night baker job at one of his bakeries with a dismissive wave of his hand. I smiled and thanked him, swallowing my pride. But the next day changed everything. While unpacking Paul's old things, I found my research journals and realized the terrible truth. Michael's entire health food empire, his wealth, his success, his reputation was built on research he had stolen from me. My life's work, my formulations, my healing compounds that I had developed decades ago before giving everything up to nurse him through childhood illness. He had taken it all and erased my name. Now I had a choice to make. I never thought I would end up here at 67, surrounded by cardboard boxes containing what remained of my life. 3 months ago, I held Paul's hand as he took his final breath after 42 years of marriage. Now I stood in our empty apartment, correction, my formerly empty apartment, as the landlord waited impatiently by the door for me to leave. "Mrs. Thompson, I really need those keys now," he said, not unkindly but firmly. I nodded, slipping the cool metal into his palm. "Of course. Thank you for the extra week." The medical bills had devoured our modest savings long before Paul passed. I'd managed to keep up with rent for a few months by selling furniture, his watch collection, even my wedding ring. But eventually, the eviction notice appeared on my door. With nowhere else to turn, I made the call I'd been dreading. Michael, my only child, lived across town in a house that appeared regularly in architectural magazines. He was a success story, the founder of Vital Bread, a health food empire known nationwide for bread products that customers swore improved everything from digestion to sleep. As I wheeled my suitcase toward the waiting taxi, I remembered how proud I'd once been of my own work. Before Michael was born, I'd been a promising medical researcher working on plant-derived compounds with remarkable healing properties. I published papers. I had potential. Then Michael got sick at age 8, terribly, life-threateningly sick, and I abandoned it all to care for him. No regrets, I told myself then. Family first. The taxi pulled up to a sprawling modern home with floor-to-ceiling windows and a manicured lawn. Michael opened the door before I could knock, his expression more resigned than welcoming. "Mom," he said, the word falling flat between us. No hug, no warmth. "Thank you for this," I said, trying to sound grateful rather than desperate. "It won't be for long, I promise. Come in, Vanessa's making dinner." Michael's wife barely looked up from her tablet when we entered the gleaming kitchen. Their son Tyler, my 12-year-old grandson, offered a shy wave from the corner where he was doing homework. "Hello, Alina," Vanessa said, her tone suggesting I was an unexpected delivery rather than family. "We've prepared the guest room. It's small, but it should be adequate." The room was indeed small, barely larger than a closet, with a twin bed and a nightstand. No dresser. The message was clear: don't get too comfortable. Dinner was a quiet affair, with Michael and Vanessa discussing business matters while I pushed food around my plate. The walls were decorated with framed magazine covers featuring Michael's smiling face and headlines about his revolutionary health breads. "So," I ventured, "business is going well?" Michael nodded curtly. "Very. We're opening 3 new bakeries next month." "That's wonderful. I always knew you'd be successful." "Yes, well, success comes to those who take initiative," he replied, sharing a knowing look with Vanessa. After dinner, I tried to connect with Tyler, asking about school and his interests. He seemed genuinely curious about me, asking what I did before retirement. Before I could really answer, Vanessa called him away for homework. I spent that night staring at the ceiling, wondering how my son had become this cold stranger. Where was the boy I'd nursed through fevers, the teenager I'd worked double shifts to put through college? I'd given him everything. Somehow it hadn't been enough. Morning came too quickly. I made my way to the kitchen, hoping to prepare breakfast as a small way to contribute. Michael was already there, suited up for work, a folder in his hands. "Mom, we need to talk," he said, gesturing to a chair. I sat, hands folded in my lap. "I've been thinking about your situation." Hope flickered briefly. Perhaps he was going to offer financial help or suggest I stay until I found my footing. "I don't feed extra mouths," he continued, sliding the folder toward me. "Especially ones that don't contribute." The folder contained an application for a night baker position at one of his bakeries. Not a management role or anything that might utilize my background in science. A basic entry-level position requiring hours of physical labor. "The pay isn't much, but it will help you start saving for your own place," he said, checking his watch. "The manager expects you tonight at 10 p.m. The address is there." I stared at him, this stranger wearing my son's face. How had I raised someone who could look at his homeless mother and see only an extra mouth to feed? But what choice did I have? Pride wouldn't pay for an apartment. "Thank you," I managed, forcing a smile. "This is very thoughtful. I appreciate the opportunity." He nodded, seemingly satisfied with my gratitude. "We all have to pull our weight, Mom. That's how the world works." As he left for work, Vanessa lingered in the doorway. "At least now she'll be useful," she whispered to him, just loud enough for me to hear. That night I reported to the bakery, a sleek storefront with the Vital Bread logo prominently displayed. The manager, a harried young man named Greg, barely looked at me as he handed over an apron. "Mrs. Thompson, your son said you needed hours. We start the morning bakes at 11 p.m. Lucille will show you the ropes." Lucille, a woman perhaps 10 years my junior, gave me a sympathetic smile. "First time baking?" "Professionally, yes," I admitted. "But I've been baking at home for decades." "This is different," she warned. "Industrial mixers, strict recipes, heavy lifting. And the special ingredients require precise measurements." My body wasn't prepared for the physical demands. By 3 a.m., my back screamed in protest as I loaded trays into massive ovens. My hands, once steady enough to pipette microscopic amounts of compounds, now trembled with exhaustion. "The customers swear by this bread," Lucille said during our brief break. "People with chronic conditions say it's changed their lives." One regular claims her arthritis improved after a month of eating the cinnamon loaf daily. "Really?" I was intrigued despite my exhaustion. "What's in it?" Lucille shrugged. "The special ingredients are kept locked up. Only managers and a few trusted bakers handle those. Very hush-hush. Michael's secret recipe is what built this empire." I nodded, too tired to ask more questions. As dawn approached and we finished the morning's baking, I noticed a locked room at the back of the kitchen. Through the window in the door, I glimpsed shelves of unlabeled containers. Greg noticed my gaze. "That's off limits to new staff. Company policy." I returned to Michael's house as the sun rose, my body aching, my mind racing with questions about these mysterious ingredients with apparent healing properties. Little did I know, the answers were waiting for me in the boxes I'd begin unpacking that afternoon, answers that would shatter everything I thought I knew about my son and the empire he'd built. I slept fitfully that day, my body unaccustomed to night work and my mind troubled by the coldness in my son's eyes. When I woke in the late afternoon, the house was quiet, Michael at work, Vanessa at her yoga class, and Tyler at soccer practice. The perfect time to unpack the few boxes I'd brought with me. I started with Paul's things, the items I couldn't bear to sell. His favorite sweater, worn at the elbows. The fountain pen I'd given him on our 30th anniversary. A photo album documenting our life together. And then I found the box I'd almost forgotten about. It was an old cardboard file box labeled Aliner's Research in Paul's neat handwriting. He'd always been so proud of my early work, even after I abandoned it to care for Michael. I opened it, expecting to find dusty memories, but what I discovered sent a chill through me. Inside were my research journals, meticulously documented studies on plant-derived compounds that showed remarkable properties for healing various conditions. I've been particularly focused on a family of molecules that reduced inflammation and regulated immune responses. The work had been promising, revolutionary even, before I gave it up. I flipped through pages of formulations, molecular diagrams, and clinical observations. It had been decades since I'd looked at these, but the familiarity rushed back. This had been my passion once, before being Michael's mother became my entire identity. A notation caught my eye, a specific compound ratio I developed for targeted anti-inflammatory effects. Something about it seemed oddly familiar, though I couldn't place why. That night at the bakery, I approached the work with renewed focus. While mixing dough, I carefully observed the recipe cards, noting proportions and ingredients. Standard flour, salt, yeast, nothing unusual. But then came the special additions that only Greg was allowed to measure from the locked room. Those are what make Vital Bread special, Lucille explained as we worked side by side. Nobody knows exactly what they are except Michael and a few trusted people. How interesting, I said casually. And people really notice health benefits? Oh, absolutely. Mrs. Reynolds swears the sourdough cured her digestive issues. Mr. Patel's joint pain improved within weeks. It's remarkable. Inflammation, digestive issues, joint pain. These were precisely the conditions my research had targeted. When Greg stepped away to take a phone call, leaving his key card on the counter, I made a split-second decision. I grabbed it, slipped into the special ingredient room, and quickly scanned the shelves. The containers were labeled with coded names, VB1, AC34, PM7, but a notebook on the counter contained the formulation records. My heart nearly stopped as I read the notations. These weren't just similar to my work, they were exact replicas of my formulations, down to the precise ratios I'd documented decades ago. Only the names had been changed, rebranded as proprietary sourdough cultures and probiotic enhancers. I heard footsteps and quickly replaced the key card, returning to my station just as Greg returned. My hands trembled as I kneaded dough, my mind racing. This couldn't be coincidence. These were my compounds, my research, now making millions for my son while I struggled to afford rent. The next morning, exhausted but too agitated to sleep, I pulled out my old journals again and compared notes. There was no doubt. The miracle ingredients in Vital Bread were the exact compounds I'd developed. Even the proportions matched my optimal formulations. But how had Michael gotten them? How had he even understood the complex biochemistry involved? I was a medical researcher. He had studied business. Then a memory surfaced. 5 years ago, when Paul first became ill, Michael had visited. He'd helped us organize the basement where these research materials had been stored. I remembered him asking questions about my abandoned career, showing more interest than he had in years. Had he recognized the value of what I'd created? Had he stolen it deliberately? I checked the dates. Michael's first Vital Bread shop had opened shortly after that visit. The timing aligned perfectly. I thought back to those magazine covers on his wall. Health visionary, they called him. Scientific innovator. All built on research he'd taken from me without acknowledgement or permission. That night at the bakery, I observed more carefully. The customers who came in as we opened at 6 a.m. spoke about the bread in almost reverent terms. An elderly man told Lucille his arthritis pain had diminished substantially. A young woman credited the cinnamon loaf with resolving her chronic fatigue. It's the probiotics, Lucille told them with a wink. Michael's special formula. I bit my tongue. It wasn't probiotics. It was my life's work, the research I'd abandoned to care for the very person who had now appropriated it. During my break, I snapped photos of the recipe cards with my phone and later compared them to my journals. The deception was elaborate but clear to someone who knew what to look for. He disguised my medical compounds as baking ingredients, but the molecular structures remained unchanged. I was still reeling from this discovery when I arrived back at Michael's house the following morning. I found Vanessa in the kitchen, looking annoyed at my presence. "You're tracking flour everywhere," she said by way of greeting. "Sorry," I muttered, too preoccupied to be offended. "I'll clean it up." Tyler appeared, backpack in hand, ready for school. "Morning, Grandma. How was the bakery?" "Interesting," I said honestly. "I'm learning a lot." "Dad says you're not very experienced," he replied innocently. but that everyone has to start somewhere. My cheeks burned with humiliation and anger. Not experienced, I'd been a published researcher in biochemistry and molecular medicine. I developed formulations that were apparently effective enough for Michael to build an empire upon them. Your father is right, I said carefully. We all start somewhere. Some of us just take different paths. After Tyler left for school, I retreated to my room, mind whirling with implications. Michael had not only taken my research but was actively benefiting from my expertise while treating me like a burden, an extra mouth to feed. I heard Michael come home for lunch, his voice echoing through the house as he spoke on the phone. Yes, we're expanding the therapeutic line next quarter. The customer testimonials are incredible. Therapeutic line. He was marketing my medical research as food, without trials, without oversight, without understanding the full implications. What if there were long-term effects I hadn't documented? What if certain conditions were contraindicated? For the first time, anger overshadowed my hurt. This wasn't just about credit or money, though both had been stolen from me. This was about safety and ethics. Michael was playing with people's health based on research he couldn't possibly fully understand. I needed evidence, proof that was undeniable, and I needed to determine what I would do with that proof once I had it. That evening, before heading to the bakery, I noticed Tyler struggling with his science homework at the kitchen table. Need help? I offered. He looked relieved. Yes, please. It's biochemistry stuff about enzymes. Dad's too busy and Mom doesn't know science. I smiled, sitting beside him. Well, before I was a baker, I actually knew quite a bit about biochemistry. As I explained concepts that had once been the foundation of my career, I saw a spark of interest in his eyes, the same spark I'd once had. And for the first time since arriving at Michael's house, I felt a purpose beyond survival. For the next few days, I gathered evidence methodically, like the scientist I once was. Each night at the bakery, I documented the special ingredient formulations, photographing the containers when no one was looking. Between shifts, I compared these to my old research journals, confirming my suspicions with each matching compound ratio. 5 years ago, when Michael had helped us organize the basement during Paul's first bout of illness, I'd barely noticed his interest in my old research boxes. Now I remembered how he had asked questions about my previous career, seeming genuinely curious for the first time in years. You were going to patent some of this, right, Mom? He had asked, flipping through my notebooks. That was the plan before you got sick, I had replied. But family comes first. I thought he was finally acknowledging my sacrifice. Instead, he had been assessing the value of what I'd abandoned. The betrayal cut deeper than I could have imagined. Not just the theft of intellectual property, but the calculated nature of it. He had waited until Paul was ill, when I was distracted by grief and worry, to mine my past for his profit. My relationship with Tyler was becoming my one bright spot. He sought me out for help with science homework, fascinated by my knowledge. Dad never told me you were a scientist, he said one afternoon as I explained cellular respiration. It was a long time ago, I replied carefully. Before your father was born. Is that why you know so much about enzymes and stuff? Yes, I studied biochemistry before I became a mother. Tyler looked thoughtful. Dad says science is important, but business is where the real opportunities are. They can work together, I said. Some of the most successful innovations come from understanding both. He nodded, then asked hesitantly, Grandma, if you know so much science, why are you baking bread at night instead of doing something more important? The question pierced me. How could I explain to a 12-year-old that his father had stolen my life's work while treating me like a burden? Sometimes life takes unexpected turns, I said instead. But it's never too late to return to what you love. That evening, I noticed Tyler watching his father enter a password on his laptop before dinner. The boy caught my eye and mouthed the characters with an impish grin. Such a simple act of complicity, yet it felt monumental. After my shift at the bakery, while the house was still quiet with morning stillness, I sat at Michael's desk and typed in the password Tyler had shared. The laptop unlocked immediately, revealing dozens of business folders. I clicked on one labeled Product Development. There, in digital form, were my research diagrams, scanned from my original notebooks but with my name carefully removed. Formulations I had developed through years of painstaking work were now labeled Vital Bread Proprietary Formulas, dated 4 years ago with Michael listed as the developer. I found emails between Michael and his business partners discussing the discovery of these health-promoting compounds. "No one understands the full potential of what we've developed," Michael had written. "This isn't just bread, it's medicine disguised as food. And the best part, no FDA approval needed since we're marketing it as bread, not drugs." My hands shook with anger. He hadn't just stolen my research. He was deliberately circumventing medical regulations by packaging it as food. While my compounds were likely safe based on my early testing, I had never completed the rigorous clinical trials needed for medical applications. I had planned that as the next phase of my research before abandoning it for Michael's care. I copied key files onto a small USB drive I'd purchased, then carefully closed everything, making sure to leave no trace of my investigation. Evidence secured, I now faced the hardest question: what to do with it. I could expose Michael publicly, revealing his fraud to the world. His business would collapse, his reputation ruined. Justice would be served, but at what cost? I would destroy my son, hurt my grandson, and potentially end up truly homeless if the business that was currently paying my meager salary imploded. Alternatively, I could confront Michael privately, demand recognition and compensation for my work. But given his treatment of me so far, would he listen? Or would he simply throw me out, denying everything? A third option formed in my mind. I could use my knowledge to improve the products from within, reclaiming my research by applying it properly. If I could gain access to the formulation process, I could ensure the compounds were being used safely and effectively, while gathering more evidence of my contribution. My contemplation was interrupted by sounds of the household awakening. I quickly shut down the laptop and returned to my room, the USB drive tucked safely in my pocket. That day, I witnessed something that clarified my decision. A longtime bakery employee named Jerome questioned Greg about the special ingredients. "My wife has a gluten sensitivity," Jerome said. "I want to make sure there's nothing in the special mix that might affect her." Michael happened to be visiting the bakery for an inspection. His response was immediate and harsh. "The formulations are proprietary," he snapped. "If you can't follow company policy about not questioning the ingredients, perhaps this isn't the right job for you." Jerome had worked there for 3 years. He was fired on the spot. Lucille pulled me aside afterward. "That's the fifth person this year who's asked too many questions about the special ingredients. Michael is obsessive about keeping the formulas secret." "Has anyone ever found out what's in them?" I asked. "Not and kept their job," she replied. "Though many have tried, there are rumors it's some kind of superfood extract or ancient grain. Whatever it is, it works. But Michael guards those formulas like they're gold." That night at dinner, I nearly confronted Michael. The words burned in my throat as he complained about employees who don't respect intellectual property. The hypocrisy was staggering. But then I saw Tyler watching his father with admiration, and I swallowed my accusations. I couldn't destroy the image he had of Michael without careful consideration. The boy deserved better than to have his family implode in front of him. As I prepared for another night shift, I formulated my plan. I would start making subtle improvements to the bread formulations, drawing on my deeper understanding of the compounds. When the products showed enhanced effectiveness, I would document everything, building an undeniable case that I was the true developer of these formulations. It wasn't just about justice anymore. It was about reclaiming my life's work and ensuring it was being used properly. If Michael wanted to profit from my research, he would have to acknowledge its true creator and accept my expertise. The bakery would become my laboratory once again. And this time, I wouldn't abandon my work for anyone, not even my son. My plan began with small adjustments to the bread formulations, subtle enough to go unnoticed by management but significant enough to enhance the effects. With decades of research experience, I understood these compounds on a molecular level in ways Michael never could. I knew how to optimize their absorption, how certain ingredients might enhance or inhibit their effects, and how temperature affected their stability. During my third week at the bakery, I got my opportunity when Greg came down with the flu. Short-staffed and desperate, he reluctantly authorized me to handle the special ingredients for the night. Just follow the measurements exactly, he instructed, his voice raspy. No experimentation. Michael would have my head. Of course, I assured him, hiding my excitement. That night I made my first calculated modification. For the anti-inflammatory compound used in the sourdough, I adjusted the ratio slightly and added a trace amount of vitamin C to the mix, a catalyzing agent I'd discovered in my original research that enhanced its efficacy by nearly 40%. I carefully documented my changes in a small notebook hidden in my apron pocket, recording exact measurements and my hypotheses about expected outcomes. It felt exhilarating to be doing real science again, even under these bizarre circumstances. Within days, customers began commenting on the enhanced effects. Mrs. Reynolds, the woman with digestive issues, stopped Lucille one morning. "This batch is different," she said. "Better somehow. My symptoms have improved dramatically this week." Other regulars noticed too. The arthritis patient reported greater mobility. A customer with chronic fatigue said she had more energy than she'd had in years. Greg was baffled but pleased by the positive feedback. "Must be a particularly good crop of our special ingredients this season," he speculated. Michael visited the bakery the following week, studying sales reports with obvious satisfaction. "Customer retention is up 15% this month," he told Greg within my earshot. "And we're seeing more testimonials about health benefits. Whatever you're doing, keep it up." Greg looked confused. "We haven't changed anything, sir," Michael frowned. "Then explain these results. Maybe it's seasonal factors affecting the ingredients," Greg suggested weakly. Michael's eyes narrowed with suspicion. "Check the inventory logs and security footage. If someone's tampering with our formulations, I want to know." My heart raced, but I kept my expression neutral as I continued kneading dough. I needed to be more careful. I'd underestimated Michael's monitoring systems. That evening at home, Tyler sought me out while I was preparing for my shift. "Grandma, Dad's really excited about something at work. He says the bread is working better than ever." I smiled. "That's wonderful. He thinks someone might be changing his recipes, though," Tyler continued innocently. "He was on the phone talking about checking cameras and stuff." My stomach tightened. "Is that so?" Tyler nodded. "He seemed kind of mad about it, but isn't it good if the bread is helping more people?" "Sometimes people get protective of their ideas," I explained carefully. "Even when improvements are being made. Like when Bobby got mad that I suggested a better way to build our science project?" Tyler asked. "Exactly like that." That night I was more cautious. I made no further adjustments but continued monitoring the effects of my previous changes. The improved formulations were holding steady, delivering better results than Michael's original recipes. I needed to be strategic about building my case. I had the USB drive with evidence of Michael's theft, my original research journals proving my development of these compounds, and now data showing my improved formulations were more effective. But I needed more time to document everything thoroughly before confronting him. As weeks passed, I refined my approach. I made improvements only when Greg was absent, and ensured my changes were subtle enough to be attributed to normal variations in baking. I kept meticulous records, building a scientific case that would be irrefutable. My confidence grew as I reclaimed my expertise. This was my research, my life's work. Despite Michael's theft, he lacked the fundamental understanding to fully optimize these compounds. I was the scientist, not him. The bakery became my laboratory again. Late at night, while others focused on production quotas, I conducted what amounted to clinical trials, carefully noting customer feedback, tracking reported improvements, and refining my formulations based on results. My body adjusted to the night schedule, and for the first time in years, I felt intellectually alive. The physical demands of baking remained challenging, but the mental stimulation of applying my scientific knowledge made it worthwhile. Michael, meanwhile, became increasingly obsessed with the improved results. He hired consultants to analyze the bread, installed additional security cameras, and began making surprise visits to the bakery during night shifts. During one such visit, he cornered me near the ovens. "How are you finding the work, Mom?" "Fulfilling," I answered honestly. "I enjoy the precision of it." His eyes narrowed. "You seem to have adjusted quickly for someone with no commercial baking experience." "I was a scientist once," I replied, unable to resist the subtle reminder. Precision measurements were my specialty. Something flickered across his face, recognition, perhaps, or worry. "Right before you gave it all up. Family always came first for me." His expression hardened. "Well, just remember that at Vital Bread, company protocols come first. No one deviates from the established recipes, no matter who they are." The threat was thinly veiled, but I met his gaze steadily. "I understand completely." After he left, Lucille whispered, "He's never monitored the night shift this closely before. Something's got him rattled." I nodded, feigning ignorance while inwardly acknowledging the precariousness of my position. If Michael discovered my modifications before I had built my full case, I would lose everything again. At home, the atmosphere grew increasingly tense. Michael began questioning me about my shifts, who I worked with, what exactly I did. Vanessa watched me with undisguised suspicion whenever I interacted with Tyler, especially during our science homework sessions. One evening, I overheard them arguing about me in their bedroom. "She's been here almost 2 months," Vanessa hissed. "When is she moving out?" "Soon," Michael replied. "But something strange is happening at the bakery. The products are improving, but no one can explain why." "You think it's her?" Vanessa sounded incredulous. "I don't see how. She's just mixing dough. She doesn't have access to the formulations." If only he knew. During a family dinner that weekend, Michael boasted about a major magazine wanting to profile him as a health food innovator. "They're calling me a visionary," he said, smiling at Vanessa. "They want to know the story behind how I developed the therapeutic bread line." I nearly choked on my water. "How interesting. What will you tell them?" Michael's eyes met mine briefly before he looked away. "The truth, of course. How years of research and experimentation led to these breakthrough formulations." Tyler looked at me. "Didn't you say you used to be a scientist, Grandma? Did you ever make any breakthroughs?" The table fell silent. Michael's fork froze halfway to his mouth. "I had some promising research once," I said carefully, "on plant compounds with therapeutic properties, but I never got to complete it." "Why not?" Tyler asked. I felt Michael's eyes boring into me, silently warning me not to continue. "Life took a different turn," I said simply. "Family became my priority." Tyler looked between his father and me, sensing the undercurrent of tension. "Maybe Dad could hire you as a scientist instead of a baker," he suggested innocently. "Since you know so much about health stuff too." Michael laughed too loudly. "Mom's been out of the field for decades, Tyler. Science has advanced considerably since then." "Still," Tyler persisted, "isn't experience valuable?" "Not when it's outdated," Michael said dismissively. "Now who wants dessert?" Later that night, as I prepared for work, I nearly confronted Michael with everything I knew. The dismissive way he had belittled my expertise in front of Tyler had rekindled my anger. But I held back, recognizing that an emotional confrontation would only weaken my position. I needed complete, irrefutable evidence before I made my move. And I was almost there. With each passing day, my improved formulations demonstrated superior results. With each satisfied customer, each positive testimonial, I documented further proof that I understood these compounds better than Michael ever could. Soon I would have enough evidence to reclaim what was mine. The scientist in me had awakened, and she would not be silenced again. The confrontation came sooner than I expected. I arrived at the bakery for my shift on a Tuesday night to find Michael waiting, his expression thunderous. Greg stood nearby, looking nervous, while Lucille avoided eye contact. "Everyone out," Michael ordered the other workers. "Except my mother." The staff filed out silently, leaving just the two of us in the cavernous bakery. My heart pounded, but I kept my expression neutral. I had prepared for this moment, though I had hoped to gather more evidence first. You've been altering the formulations, Michael said, his voice dangerously quiet. We checked the security footage. 3 times in the past month you've modified the special ingredients. I considered denying it but decided against it. This confrontation was inevitable. I improved them. Improved? He slammed his hand on the stainless steel counter. Those are proprietary formulations. You had no right to touch them. No right. Something broke inside me, the dam holding back weeks of hurt and betrayal. Those are my formulations, Michael. My research that you stole from our basement 5 years ago when your father was sick. He paled slightly but recovered quickly. That's absurd. I developed those compounds through years of independent research. I reached into my bag and pulled out my old research journal, opening it to a marked page. Compound AC34, as you call it now. I named it Compound 617B in 1987. Here's the exact molecular structure, which matches what you're using down to the last hydrogen bond. Michael glanced at the journal but didn't touch it. Anyone can fake old notes. I also have these. I placed a printed copy of the files I'd found on his laptop, the scanned pages of my research with my name carefully removed. You didn't even bother to change the diagrams, just erased my name. Sloppy work for a so-called innovator. His face flushed with anger. You went through my computer, that's illegal. So is intellectual property theft, I countered. What you've done is fraud, Michael. You built your entire business on research you stole from me, research I abandoned to save your life when you were sick as a child. He scoffed. Save my life? You're being dramatic. It was pneumonia. It was acute respiratory distress syndrome following pneumonia, I corrected. You were in the hospital for 3 weeks. I slept in a chair beside your bed. I resigned from my research position to care for you because your father's job didn't have the flexibility for him to take time off. So what? Michael's voice rose. You made a choice. That's what parents do. They sacrifice for their children. You don't get to hold that over me forever. I never did, I said quietly. I never once regretted putting you first. What I regret is raising a son who would steal from his own mother and then treat her like a burden. Michael paced the floor, agitated. This is ridiculous. That research was sitting in boxes, abandoned. You weren't doing anything with it. I took something worthless and made it valuable. It was never worthless, I said. I had plans to return to it once you were healthy and in school full time. But then your father lost his job, and I had to take extra nursing shifts to keep us afloat. One setback after another pushed my research further away. That's life, he snapped. Opportunities come and go. I saw potential and acted on it. You stole my life's work and erased me from it, I said, my voice steady despite the hurt. And now you have the audacity to call me an extra mouth to feed when the food on your table, the roof over your head, all of it came from my research. You're being ridiculous, he said, but his eyes darted away from mine. I built this business through hard work and vision. Your vision came from my journals, I countered. And now you're upset because I improved the formulations you never fully understood to begin with. His expression darkened. The formulations were perfect before you interfered. Then explain why customer satisfaction has increased 30% since my modifications, I challenged. Why people are reporting better results, faster recovery, fewer side effects. You understand the business side, Michael, but you never understood the science. You think you know so much, he snarled. But where were you when I was building this company, working double shifts at the hospital while Dad drank himself to sleep every night? I stepped back, stunned. What are you talking about? Your father rarely drank. After you started taking night shifts, Michael said bitterly. You were never home. Dad was depressed for years, but you were too busy with your patients to notice. I was the one who took care of him while you were saving strangers. This was a version of our family history I'd never heard before. Had I been so focused on providing financially that I'd missed my husband's struggles? Had Michael resented me all these years for working instead of being home? I was trying to keep a roof over our heads, I said softly. Your father lost his job during the recession. Someone had to pay the bills. We would have been fine with less, Michael insisted. We needed you home, not your paychecks. Old guilt resurfaced, the working mother's eternal dilemma. Had I made the wrong choices? But then I remembered the present situation, how quickly Michael had relegated me to servant status when I needed help. If you resented my absence so much, I asked, why treat me with such contempt now? Why make me bake bread all night instead of offering real help when I lost everything? Because you always made me feel like I wasn't enough, he shouted. Always the patient nurse, the brilliant researcher who gave it all up for her sick child, the martyr. I had to live with that story my whole life, how much you sacrificed for me. I stared at my son, seeing for the first time the wounded child behind the successful businessman. I never meant to make you feel that way. But you did. His voice cracked slightly. And then I found your research and I understood it. I saw its potential when you couldn't. I made something of it. I proved I was worthy of your sacrifice. The irony was heartbreaking. All those years I thought I was modeling dedication and hard work. Instead, I had inadvertently made my son feel inadequate, like he had to prove his worth. You could have come to me, I said. We could have developed it together. You would have taken over, he said bitterly. The brilliant Alina Thompson returning to her research with her son as the footnote. Before I could respond, the bakery door opened. Tyler stood there, his eyes wide with confusion. Dad, Grandma, what's happening? I followed you here because you left so angry. Michael looked stricken. Tyler, go wait in the car. This is adult business. Are you firing Grandma? Tyler asked, stepping into the bakery. I heard you yelling. It's complicated, Michael began. Your father and I are having a disagreement about work, I explained, trying to keep my voice calm for Tyler's sake. Tyler looked between us. Is it about the special ingredients? The ones Grandma improved? Michael's head snapped toward his son. What do you know about that? Grandma explained how certain compounds work better together, Tyler said. It's like the science project we did on Catalyst. She knows a lot about molecular stuff. You've been discussing company secrets with my son? Michael's voice rose again. No, I said firmly. I've been teaching him basic biochemistry to help with his homework. He's drawn his own conclusions. Tyler approached his father. Dad, why are you so mad at Grandma? If she made the bread better, isn't that good? Michael seemed at a loss for words. Your father is protective of his work, I said carefully. But Tyler hesitated, looking confused. Grandma said she used to research the same stuff way before you did, Dad. She showed me her old journal. The diagrams matched the ones on your computer. The silence that followed was deafening. Michael stared at his son, then at me. You've been turning my son against me? He asked, his voice low. I've been honest with him, I replied. Something you should try. Michael's face contorted with anger. That's it, you're done here. Pack your things from the house tonight. I want you gone by morning. Dad, no, Tyler protested. That's not fair. Stay out of this, Tyler, Michael snapped. If you throw your grandmother out, you'll have to explain to Tyler exactly why, I said quietly. The full truth. About my research, about how you took it, about calling me an extra mouth to feed while you profit from my life's work. Michael's eyes narrowed. You wouldn't. I don't want to, I admitted. But I won't be discarded again, not by you, not by anyone. We stood at an impasse, mother and son, with decades of misunderstanding and hurt between us. And in the middle stood Tyler, witness to a family legacy threatening to unravel. Dad, Tyler said, breaking the tense silence, did you really take Grandma's research? Michael's eyes darted between his son and me. I could see the calculations happening behind his eyes, weighing his options, looking for a way out that preserved his image. It's complicated, Tyler, he finally said. It's not complicated, Tyler insisted with the moral clarity of a 12-year-old. You either took it or you didn't. Michael ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I remembered from his childhood whenever he was caught in a lie. I used some of her old notes as a starting point. That's normal in research. Without giving her credit, Tyler pressed. We learned about plagiarism in school. Mrs. Hernandez says taking someone's work without acknowledging them is stealing. I remained silent, letting this unfold. Tyler was asking the questions I wanted answered, with an innocence that was more powerful than my accusations. Michael sighed heavily. Look, your grandmother abandoned that research decades ago. It was gathering dust in boxes. I saw its potential and developed it further. But it was still her work, Tyler insisted. And now you're trying to throw her out of our house for making it better? Michael looked at me with a mix of anger and resignation. You've certainly done a number on him. I've done nothing except tell him the truth when he asked, I said quietly. Something you should have done from the beginning. For a long moment, the only sound was the gentle hum of the bakery refrigerators. Then Michael did something unexpected. He pulled out a chair and sat down, suddenly looking exhausted. Fine, he said. You want the truth, Tyler? Yes, I used Grandma's research without giving her credit. I found her notebooks when Grandpa was sick and I saw an opportunity. I was struggling with my business at the time, about to lose everything. Her formulations were brilliant and they worked. They saved my company. Tyler looked at his father with disappointment. So you stole? Michael winced. I took something that wasn't being used and made it successful. But now you won't even let Grandma stay with us after she took care of you when you were sick. It's more complicated than that, Michael began. Is it? I interjected. You called me an extra mouth to feed, Michael. You made me work night shifts baking bread rather than offering real help when I needed it. All while living in luxury built on my research. Tyler's eyes widened. You said that to Grandma, Dad? Michael had the grace to look ashamed. I didn't mean it like that. How else could you mean it? I asked, years of hurt finally finding voice. You treated me like a burden when I came to you for help, your own mother. Michael stood abruptly and paced the floor. I was angry, okay? Angry that you needed me, that you were suddenly dependent on me after all these years of being the strong one, the provider, the martyr. I never saw myself that way, I said softly. But that's how it felt to me, he exclaimed. Growing up with the perfect, selfless mother who gave up everything for her child. Do you have any idea what kind of pressure that put on me? To be worthy of that sacrifice, I felt a knot form in my throat. Had my attempts to protect him from financial insecurity instead loaded him with emotional debt? So when I found your research, he continued, it felt like finally I could prove myself. I could take something you'd abandoned and make it successful. Show you that your sacrifice wasn't wasted on me. Oh, Michael, I whispered. I never thought it was wasted. I was always proud of you long before you built this business. He shook his head. You were disappointed when I chose business school over science. I saw it in your eyes. I thought back, trying to remember. Had I unconsciously pushed my unfulfilled ambitions onto him? I only wanted you to have choices, I said. The choices I gave up. And I made my choice, he replied. But then you showed up needing help and all those complicated feelings came rushing back. I thought making you work would even the score somehow. Make us quits for all your sacrifices. We're family, I said. We don't keep score. Tyler, who had been listening intently, spoke up. Dad, remember when I broke your model ship and tried to fix it without telling you? Michael looked confused by the change of subject. What does that have to do with anything? You told me then that mistakes aren't as bad if you own up to them, Tyler said. You said honest people admit when they're wrong and try to make it right. Michael looked at his son for a long moment, then gave a short, rueful laugh. Using my own parenting against me, that's fair. So make it right, Tyler said simply. Michael turned to me, conflict evident on his face. What do you want, Mom? Money, credit, to expose me? I considered the question carefully. What did I truly want? Not revenge, not even justice exactly. Partnership, I said finally. Recognition for my work, yes, but also the opportunity to continue it properly. Those formulations have real potential to help people, but they need to be developed with scientific rigor. You understand the business side. I understand the science. Together we could do something remarkable. Michael looked skeptical. You want to join the company? I want to lead the research division of the company, I clarified, where I can ensure these compounds are being used safely and effectively. And yes, I want proper compensation for the intellectual property you've been profiting from. He considered this, calculations running behind his eyes again, but different ones this time. The press would love it, he said slowly. Mother-son team revolutionizing health food. It's a great story. It's not about the story, I said firmly. It's about doing what's right. Tyler looked between us hopefully. So Grandma can stay and you'll work together? Michael hesitated, then nodded. We can try, but the improved formulations are proprietary to the company, understood? No more unauthorized experiments. They weren't unauthorized, I corrected. They were conducted by the original researcher. But going forward, all modifications will be properly documented and approved through appropriate channels. 6 months later, I stood in my new office at Vital Bread headquarters, examining the latest test results from our clinical trials. After decades away from research, I was back in my element, leading a team of young scientists who looked at me with respect rather than pity. The transition hadn't been easy. Michael and I still had moments of tension when old resentments surfaced. But we were learning to communicate honestly, to acknowledge the complicated history between us while building something new. The rebranding had been successful beyond expectations. Eliner's Healing Bread, featuring my face on the packaging, had quickly become our premium line. Sales had increased 45% in the first quarter alone. More importantly, we were now developing these formulations with proper scientific protocols. The compounds I discovered decades ago were finally reaching their full potential, helping thousands of people manage chronic conditions through nutrition. My relationship with Michael had evolved from adversarial to collaborative. He still had his moments of arrogance, still sometimes fell into old patterns of dismissing my input, but he was learning. We both were. Vanessa had initially been hostile to the changes, seeing me as a threat to her comfortable lifestyle. But as the company flourished under our joint leadership, even she had to acknowledge the benefits of our partnership. The greatest joy, though, was my relationship with Tyler. Every Tuesday afternoon, he came to my lab after school for what we called science mentorship, but was really just precious time together. I taught him about molecular structures and chemical reactions, watched his eyes light up with the same curiosity I'd once had. "Do you think I could be a scientist someday, Grandma?" he asked one afternoon as we examined bread samples under the microscope. "You can be anything you choose," I told him. "Scientist, businessman, or something entirely different. The important thing is that it's your choice, not someone else's expectation." He nodded thoughtfully. "Dad seems happier now that you're working together, less stressed." "We complement each other," I explained. "He has strengths I don't have, and vice versa." "Like a catalyst reaction," Tyler said, using terminology I taught him, "each making the other more effective." I smiled at his perfect analogy. "Exactly like that." That evening, I walked through the company's flagship bakery, now expanded to include a research cafe where customers could learn about the science behind our products. My name and face were prominently displayed alongside Michael's on the company logo, no longer erased but celebrated. A fresh loaf of sourdough had just come out of the ovens. I broke off a piece, the crust crackling perfectly between my fingers. This bread contained my improved formulation of compound 617B, now properly documented and tested through rigorous clinical trials. As I took a bite, savoring the tangy flavor and knowing the good it would do for those who needed it, I felt a profound satisfaction. At 67, when many thought my productive years were behind me, I had reclaimed my life's work and found a new purpose. I was no longer an extra mouth to feed. I was Aliner Thompson, scientist, innovator, and creator of healing bread. And no one would ever erase me again.